Thank you guys for joining us today for Finding Success with the Capability Statements presented by Dr. Brian Hunter. We're so happy to have you. This webinar will last for just about an hour. So the first maybe 45 minutes, I guess, or so will be Brian's presentation. And then afterwards, we'll have Q&A. It seems like, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, you're okay with them asking questions in between, right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. Today's presentation is being presented by the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce. They were founded in 1984 and is the most established and largest nonprofit organization representing Pan-Asian Americans and their related groups in business, sciences, the arts, sports, education, public, and community services. And namely, this is presented by the US PAC Southeast region. So we're here in Georgia and we represent the Southeastern states. This presentation is funded by the SBA Community Navigator Pilot Program, which is a program funded by the Biden White House administration. And it is administered by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, to help women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned, and small businesses with free access to consultation services to allow these businesses to grow. These are some of the services that we offer through the pilot program. Startup and pre-planning for your business operations, import-export, marketing, and there are a host of other services. And I will be able to email you this list and information about the program after the event. We also have a legal team that offers free legal consultations through the Community Navigator program. And these are some of the services they offer, free of charge, paid for by the Community Navigator program. And without further ado, here's our speaker, Dr. Brian Hunter, who is the Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship and Marketing in the Department of Business at LaGrange College. He will give you a little more detail about himself. Thank you so much, Dr. Hunter, for joining us today and agreeing to do this workshop for us.
Thanks, Aisha.
No problem.
So my background a little bit, I went to Purdue University and I got a PhD in behavioral finance and developmental economics. I've been teaching for about 10 years, pretty wide variety of subjects: entrepreneurship, strategy, economics, marketing, entrepreneurial finance, and international business. This background hopefully is what's going to allow me to be able to help train and educate US PAC Southeast clients on business planning, market feasibility, financial viability, operations management, and legal structures. So today, what we have is the capability statements, which I need to share my screen. One moment. And everybody see this okay? Get rid of some stuff. Capability statement.
Yes.
All right. So actually, I need to share this in the chat, so you can follow along on this website as well, if you'd like to use any of these resources or have a link, or if you that should work. If you can check the chat box, it just says Google Sites page Hunter capability statement. Okay, so let's get started. Hang on. Managing 3 screens. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so the purpose of a capability statement is to give a one-page marketing tool for your company to present itself to a government entity. If you'd like to put a bid in for a job and become a government contractor, This represents your company, much like a resume would represent you in a job hunt. It needs to be very succinct, short, well-organized, bulleted, short statements, carefully crafted language. And so that's what we're going to go through today is how to get that done. This is typically a requirement for most municipal, city, state, and federal contracting opportunities. And having a capability statement will allow you to be more credible in the eyes of those government entities. And when you're dealing with purchasing agents and decision makers in government offices, it would allow you to inform them in a page or maybe two what it is that your company does and can do for that government office. And hopefully, if you do a really good job and it stands out from the other marketing materials from other companies, you could possibly get a step ahead of everyone else just from appearing to be very professional and organized. Ultimately, what you'd like to do with the capability statement is to win the contract that you're putting a bid in on. So can you think of any other uses for how you would like to have your capability statement serve yourself or your company? Maybe Deborah Moon or James Gray? Or does this pretty much capture the main intention?
It captures the intention. Also, we use it for the supplier diversity, large primes to try to get work with them as well.
Okay. All right. And we'll talk about different certifications that might help with that in a bit. Okay. So there are 5 main sections. This page that I put into the chat box goes through these 5 sections with red text bolded to walk through each one. So 5 main sections that you would commonly see in a page or 2, carefully detailed, would be your company overview. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a script or some language that might help to describe any company, but you could use it specifically for yours and tailor it to your needs. Core competencies, I'll give you a couple examples of what that looks like for the Honda Motor Company or Apple Computer, and you can think about how that might help you for your own purposes. Different codes for the North American Industry Classification System or the Product and Service Classification or Federal Supply Codes would typically be found in the 3rd section. Then it goes into company data. The main part of how this might serve you would be to put in success stories of how you have previously worked with government entities, government offices, and to provide contact information for individuals at those offices that could serve as your references if they were to provide approval for you to do so. So the 4th section would be past performance, preferably with other very similar government entities to what you're applying to work for. It's not meant to be just generic Better Business Bureau sort of language, or we have great customer service. You're meant to put in essentially, we have served a number of government entities in these ways on these projects, possibly with pictures, and then put names, contact information, dates, very specific examples of how you've succeeded working with government entities in the past. All of this is hard to do to squeeze into one page, but I'll try to give you several examples of how this can look. And lastly, the 5th section just goes into special affiliations and what would make you distinguishable. And we'll see some of that as well. So some main things to consider is that you usually want to do this in one page. It should be customized for the bid that you're putting in specifically to one agency. If you have just a generic one that doesn't quite fit the interests of where you're applying, it's probably not going to stand out as well as if you customize it or tailor it. This is, again, very similar advice to what you usually hear for a resume and applying to a job. So a separate document for each agency could be that possibly you might change the first sentence and maybe the last. We'd be pleased to work with the Indiana Department of Education or the Ohio Department of Transportation, something like that at the end, and then sign the name, just so that they can see that you are focusing on their specific bid. You could put in a little bit of language specifically. If you've had a lot of jobs in the past with different government offices, you could do just the jobs that fit, that were as similar as closely to whatever you can put on that page, and not have a lot of others that aren't as relevant. Along with that idea, focusing on one agency's specific needs is probably going to be your best situation, because they're trying to solve a problem. And if they can solve a problem using your service or what you're able to provide for them, service, products, things like that, then with that in mind, if you're tailoring the document to that one company's specific problem, it very much resembles most commercials. Like, do you have this problem? Well, here we have this solution. And if you have the wrong problem in mind, then it's probably not going to get read. It's going to be discarded. So you could imagine that for each one of these bids, they're going to receive many of these statements. And if they're looking through each of them for 10 seconds initially, and it doesn't look appealing, it's probably going to get shelved and trashed and not be thought of twice. Part of that is to make this as visually appealing as you possibly can. One service that a lot of my students use for free is called Canva. It's fairly intuitive, easy to design pamphlets, flyers, resumes, basic flow charts. And they don't have a template specifically for a capability statement, but I have provided one below that we can look at, and you can think about how that might translate well into Canva. It's Canva, and the link for that is right here, or just as nice colorful layouts, canva.com. Short sentences, bulleted, a lot like this, easy to read, strong, easy keywords, bolded, sticking out, no long paragraphs of text. That's all your friend. Help people get through a lot of content very shortly. And when you save the document, if you were the Pepsi company, you would say the Pepsi company's capability statement. And finally, while you're saving it, it's usually going to be a great idea to save it as a PDF document, because it's easy to print on any printer. Modern day printer would easily print a PDF. It's difficult to screw up because people can't easily edit it. They can change it if they want to, but it's not easy. And it prints in color well. And it's not going to matter really which software they have on their computer to be able to open it. So Apple versus PC, something like that, doesn't matter. As long as it's a PDF, easily marked, they'll be able to find it and retain it for their records and use it later. All right, so special thanks to the Ohio Department of Transportation that provided that list for us here. General advice. So some useful links. The first is from Canva, Canva. Sorry. Okay. So the first is this transportationohio.gov. Most states that are interested in helping businesses connect with government entities, which is most states that I would ever have worked with or seen, or large state schools, like where I went to at Purdue, we had a PTAC, that's a procurement assistance center. They work with local governments and small businesses to help people get connected. And they're providing the same sort of advice that you'll see in this webinar today. So the links that I'm using are from these sorts of procurement assistance centers. The Georgia, right, I'm in Georgia. I'm assuming some of you are in Georgia. Georgia Tech, PTAC, they have the same sort of idea that we can look at here. So I'll flip through some of these pages. This is Georgia Tech's procurement office at the Georgia Technical University in Atlanta. They focused their first statement, how do you get started? We help Georgia businesses identify, compete for, and win government contracts. That's exactly the intention of what a capability statement would be designed for. So they would help you shape your specific document, tailor it to a specific need, give you plenty of examples in coaching, and they are paid for by public money. So it's a pretty good deal if they can be convinced to spend their time working with you. You have to be professional about it and follow their system. But if you do that, they probably would be happy to work with you. Each state is going to have some very similar sort of service. This is Canva. While we're looking at links here, it's fairly intuitive once you get started to design basic documents. You can see how they're just basically drag and dropping different text boxes and people's pictures and things like that. So it's a good thing to be familiar with, kind of like if you're used to using Photoshop or possibly Microsoft's PowerPoint. It's mostly just drag and drop. So an hour or two of working on that, and you'll be pretty well off to be able to situate yourself to design documents like a capability statement. Another link I had on there was from SCORE. This is a Service Corps retired executives. They're based all over the United States. They provide free advice from individuals who were previously government contractors, or bankers, financiers, real estate source of individuals, people that typically were successful in their fields and have retired and would like to now provide advice. So those are the links that I've provided you with here. This is probably the most relevant. So this first one is the Library of Capability Statement Examples. If you click on that and scroll through it a bit, you'll see many examples of capability statements that follow through the Department of Transportation in the state of Ohio. So it's just meant to be different formats, types of language, samples, and you can see that in this case, because they're the Department of Transportation, they have construction and other services, and then they also have consulting services. So things for like engineering firms and bridge builders that would be testing and being consulted on a short-term basis. There's 76 different examples. So I welcome you to find one that you think is the most interesting to you. If you have a general field of interest that you might be in, I'm in education. So if I search K through 12, I can see that there are 2 examples here for 2 different companies with contact information and a brief description of their companies. So if I look at these, this is a capability statement. It's very colorful, pops out, much like a really nice business card. It's a little bit cramped in some spots, and they have 4 different size fonts. You know, that's not ideal. So this was their first version. And then you get the second one, all the same size font. They use a lot of black and white to separate the page. If you can imagine moving your eye very quickly from top to bottom in maybe 5 or 10 seconds, we have the name of the company. We know what the document is. These are the major services they provide. These are the codes for how they are easily identified by the government for the services and products available. These are the, so like for web services, all the things they do for K through 12, software, systems integration, and tech support. Then they have their past performance and success working with these different individuals. And finally, their certifications and some contact information. So this is maybe the less professional looking version, and then you have the more professional looking version. So some of these have a couple options. Some have, all right, so does color matter? If the procurement officer wants to print this document, would it be an issue? Usually you want high contrast. So like this page that you're looking at right here would be black on white. If you're going to print grayscale on white, you know, there might be words that wouldn't show up. So that's a good question. You would want to be careful to be thinking about color. So this, in this first case, you might be getting a really hard time reading this. I can't read this and it's blown up, you know, there, that's it, 200 times size. So maybe with a magnifying glass. So even with a black on white or white on black, that wouldn't be great. But in this case, clearly they have a lot of contrast. Blue on black's not going to be as contrasting as white on black. And gray might not show up at all. But yeah, like this down here, obviously really hard to read, right? There's no real good reason for that. So if you've had much experience playing around with graphic design, that sort of thing, and it's the same principles are going to apply for when you take out more colors. This could be done very well in 2 or 3 tones that would have plenty of contrast behind them. And that's a good thought. Good question. So you can scroll through that link, the Library of Capability Statements, find one that you think fits what you're looking to copy, the style of it, not copy outright. You know, you might find a few that are not so good. and think that, well, that's not what I'm going for. That doesn't look like how I'd want to represent myself, and then avoid that. But for the most part, it might be helpful to start with some examples of what other people have done. There is also on this page, my page, if we scroll down below the links, under useful documents, there's a sample capability statement. It's not necessarily the best one ever. It's just another example. So now you have something like 75 examples to look at if you want to before you write your own. This is 2 pages again, and you can see how they did it. They're always trying to make themselves look as professional as possible, and very short bulleted statements, clearly organized. They're showing both commercial, corporate clients that they've served, as well as government clients. That's good because it shows that you can serve in both arenas and do just fine. Lots of previous success stories as much as possible. And then just like a business card, you want to give every aspect of contact information possible. So I welcome you to look at those sorts of examples and consider what you appreciate, what you don't about them, and act accordingly on your own strategy of what you'd like to do. This, the second document provides you with a template. So basic checklist, essentially, of make sure you have all these kinds of things in here. And the checklist, the literal checklist, I think is the third one. So this is borrowed again from the Ohio Department of Transportation. But if you look up checklists for capability statements, you'll find something very similar. This one's a few years ago, but it's the best that I could find for a very clear example of what to think about to include. So you have that link to look through those at your leisure. That's under useful documents. So any questions so far that I can be of assistance with? If you have any, you can just type it in the text box, chat box. Otherwise, what I'd like to do is to get started with the 5 sections that represent a capability statement, starting with a company overview. So we're just going to work our way through these 5 topics. The first thing, sure, can you send a link to where I can find those templates? Absolutely. Oh, actually, it's this page right here. Okay, so that's on my website, and you go to where it says useful documents, about 20% of the way down the page. Okay, thanks for asking. All right, so the first thing to think about when you're working through these sections is who's your audience. All right, who's your audience? And many of you, I'm sure, have gone through life and you've been many times dealing with businesses that are selling directly to consumers or customers. And as a consumer, you have to keep in mind that there are business to consumer businesses that, businesses like Walmart that sell directly to consumers. And there are also businesses that sell directly to other businesses. As a government contractor, you would want to think a lot more like a business to business sort of entity when you're writing the language, because your audience is probably going to be dealing in very large scale purchases from you. They're not buying one thing, like how you might have bought a laundry machine and then you don't buy another one for 30 years and you don't put much thought into the relationship that you had with the salesman. That's not the case with a business to business or a government to business arrangement. They're making a large scale investment in you. They want to see efficient, well thought out systems that can be duplicated and followed without much training. They are going to need to be trained on how to initially be a part of using your product or service so that the government's organizational purpose can be attained and achieved by using whatever it is that you're including through your bid. And they they're looking for, like I said, a long relationship, and you're probably going to need multiple levels of approval across different decision makers. So if the first person that you hand that document to has to say, this looks good enough, I'm going to choose to show this to my boss, and they say, well, we could probably go forward with that. That's only 2 levels. You might have to work through even more than that to get to the person that finally has the ultimate say to be able to approve purchase on some level of what you're able to deal with. And then you have to be able to handle the purchasing volume. So you have to give them the impression that you're able to handle a large scale operation at a government level. Obviously, municipal governments are going to be a lot simpler to convince probably than a federal government bid. And the volume would follow that same sort of scale along the way. They're thinking about the long-term objectives and goals of their organizations when you're dealing with them. This is very different than, like I was talking about, maybe if you're going to Walmart and you're thinking, what do I need? A head of lettuce, a 3-step ladder, and a bar of soap, and the only thing you're doing is walking through that store as quickly as you can, getting whatever you need, avoiding any interaction with the probably customer service if you can help it. And then you're getting out of there. Short relationships, maybe rush decisions, low purchasing volume, and it's based on what do I need today? Rapid and immediate results. That's not the same as developing a relationship with a government agency. So we have to think and be careful about how we're representing ourselves when we do this, so that there's not a situation where we seem unprofessional or unprepared to be able to develop the level of supply necessary to reach what they're looking for in the government's perspective. So hopefully that's useful to think about it that way. With that in mind, we're going to start with the company overview. And when you look at some of those sample capability statements that I showed you, just pick any one of those 77, you're going to see something very similar. It's going to be in this sort of language a company would be described. So who they are, what are they doing, serving what type of client, how does it happen, with some examples of when that's happened in the past, and which benefits are the clientele ultimately able to achieve. So there's, to the right here, some suggested language. We help do this thing, this verbiage, for this target market or customer or type of government office. How are we able to do this in this way? We deliver this way, and we have done this before in this particular fashion, focusing on benefits. If you can think about benefits being, so in the case of an umbrella, the benefit would be you're either out of the sun or you're dry. From a client's perspective, using this umbrella, they probably are thinking about the end benefit of what they're going to be able to achieve. Government, again, with much like keeping in mind this side of things, they might be looking for specific sort of information and very detailed technicality sort of things eventually, but that probably would be hard to explain in a one-page document of what's going on unless you could do it very carefully. And in the case of an umbrella, that would be talking about the type of cloth used, what sort of handle is used. The wood handle would be a feature. If it has an unbendable canopy, again, those would be features. But usually when you're selling people initially in a very short paragraph, you're probably focusing on the benefits of what it is that we're able to provide that organization. So here's sort of the same kind of 2-sentence arrangement for this customer who has this need or opportunity available. The thing that we offer is this that benefits in this way. Unlike our competitive entities, our product or service allows us to be differentiated in there, and then every word that you're going to use in a paragraph format probably would allow you to be more persuasive and be more of a salesperson from there on, but you really have to start off pretty strong. Okay, so I have a question. Thank you. How many years do you have to be in the business, or how many clients served needs to be presented one on the statement to be considered legitimate for a contract because you spoke on details. So usually, from what I've seen work and what I have read about here, it's 2 to 3 years in business before the government would want to be dealing specifically with you, unless you were incredibly persuasive and they didn't have a better alternative. They would probably want to see a number of successful examples of where you have served corporate entities, at least, or maybe local municipal government purposes, before they would be willing to take on much risk on your behalf, because as a brand new company, you have no persuasive examples of where you were able to succeed before. It would need to be for this specific business that you would be offering the service from, not what you had done 15 years back. And what you could do is, over the next 2 or 3 years getting into this, you could tailor all of your efforts to gradually working your way toward the government offices and the procurement office that you're trying to be convincing to do business with you. You could be collecting little examples of success stories along the way to add to this sort of document, so that 2 or 3 years down the line, they would look at what you have and say, it looks like you're ready to go. If you were in some field that possibly no one else was able to scratch the itch that they have, maybe they would do business with you. But if there was a competitor that had multiple years of experience and the bid was fair, they're going to go on the safer route, because that would be the obvious thing to do. So within a year or two, well prepared, it's likely that you could, in the right field, you could be selling. Okay, so that's the company overview. We have 5 sections again. That's the first bit. Core competency is a little confusing. That's the second part. So core competency, and core capability. And without being too theoretical here, I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can so that you could fit it on one page, couple of bullets in a corner. If you think about a capability being a combination of how your company behaves, the skills that it has, the processes that it undertakes, and the knowledge that you particularly have access to that's going to allow for some form of outcome. You could think about that for an engineering type firm as an R&D sort of purpose. Whatever they're able to do, that they have developed some method or practice, procedure, system, and that's being combined with some kind of natural resources or some form of land or some form of input, human resources, something like that. We're taking those resources and those abilities that have been developed over time. That becomes, with those two together, what we are great at our core in a company. And our core thing that we are the most competent at achieving is usually able to be measured in some way of how the people that work there are able to perform the capabilities that they have. And I know that's a lot of words. If you think about it as Apple Computer Company, Apple at its very core, their goal is to be innovative, and as innovative as they possibly can be. That's their core competency. So they focus on innovation. That innovation allows them to attain all sorts of different business groupings and business units within the Apple conglomerate of services and products that they put together through a lot of different businesses that they oversee. And if they are far more innovative and they focus on that innovation, with time, they would do better and better. And then they take that performance that they have, add that to additional capabilities, and expand onward into being more innovative. So that's an example from Apple Computer. If you had to think about how this looks in a metaphor of a tree, do you have a question, Hager? No? Okay. I'm going to unmute you. That's okay. If you need to say something, just press unmute. So in the perspective of Apple Computer, if Apple was a tree, okay, maybe we call it an apple tree. The core competence is the root system that nourishes and feeds the company. So that's all the people that are working there and all their ideas and innovative technology and all the things they have access to. That's what they built the company upon. They have the core products. So if the core products of Apple's computer company are maybe the iPhone, because they have the greatest contributor to revenue, they have that core product. They also have several different business units that have end products stemming from those business units, like MacBook, iPads, and all the different sorts of streaming services they would have, iWatch, all this kind of thing. And that's all ending up with the end product. But the core capability, the core competence is not that they sell watches. It's not that they have laptops available. It doesn't have much to do with that. It's that they're a very innovative, cutting edge company that focuses on consistently developing the new sets of skills and resources available to be as innovative as possible. And they just so happen to be a computer company. If you'd be interested, you can watch the same sort of video that comes from Harvard Business Review's journal that talks about Honda Motors and how Honda Motor focuses on always having the best motors. And that's how they convince people to buy from them at a corporate level, and then ultimately to end consumers that are buying CR-Vs, Civics, and Honda Pilots that go for hundreds of thousands of miles without breaking. The core competency of that would be the engine manufacturing capabilities and their research and development that has gone into all of that. So what you need to think about for your particular company is, what is it that you're combining the resources of, human resources, natural resources, and whatever capabilities that you have. What are you doing to put all that together with your own entrepreneurial mindset and spirit to put together the natural resources and the money and the capital, so land, labor, and capital, to put all that together with your own creativity to be able to ultimately develop some sort of activity and product. It's not the product that you develop. It's the idea of what is it that you're focusing on. So for Apple, it's the innovation. For Honda, it's the motors. That's two examples. I know that's theoretical, but it's essentially how you would find your core capability and competency that you could differentiate yourself between a competitor and yourself. So if you can say, what is it that you do well, and of course, what is it that you're selling along the way, and present that in a way that you're the best at it and nobody else can possibly match it, then you might be the one that gets the bid because others can't have it. Okay. So, oh, that's a lot of questions. Wow. Okay. You could, typically you would want to have the contact person's information on this document that the government official you're trying to reach would be calling. So you don't necessarily have to be that person, but it might help if they're going to be calling you and they're going to be doing business with you and you want to make it personal. The question is, do you have to be an actual owner or CEO of the company to get these contacts? Or can I present this capability statement as a representative or advisor for a solar company? So you could be a subcontractor of a company that you're partners with, and you recognize you have the right opportunity to hand off one of these statements to somebody. That could happen. You might want to have a business card on hand, or for them to be able to scan some sort of QR code real quick that gets them in contact with you off of this document or your own document so that they can find you again. This isn't a PowerPoint, it's just a website. So if you'd like, you can go to this address right here, this website, and it'll get you what you need. Okay, thanks for asking. Let's see, where were we? Company data. So this is real short. I've given you a whole bunch of websites that you can look up the codes that the government would associate with your industry and your specific offering. So you have the North American Industry classification system, or NAICS. You see these a lot with things that are imported, exported, and they have very specific tariffs tied to them and things like that. The government's got code books for all this. So you just need to know what kind of code you're going to fall into. And then they could, when they need a service that relates to that, they could look up that code and find the closest thing possible. So the PSC is product and service classifications. You can go to these websites, census.gov and the NAICS or acquisition.gov. These are all government websites to look up these codes. Then you have local, state, and federal business certifications. So if you are women-owned, minority-owned, veteran, something like that, and you have all these certifications that you've gone through that certification process with US PAC can help you with that, certainly, especially for their own certifications, US PAC certifications. Then you could advertise that on your company data. And when you're looking at those sample documents, you'll see that has the, that most of them have already done that. Just make them big enough that somebody can type it out. All right, past performance, we talked about a bit already, which is why you'd have a hard time doing this if you're right out of the gate, a brand new company. You might need a year or two of experience to be convincing. You're probably in the situation where if the people are friendly with you, you could put them down like a reference. And if somebody wasn't sure about doing business with you, they were on the fence, they might be able to call one of these past companies you did business with or past organizations, and they could say, you know, how did it go? Are you still on good terms? How did it turn out? Could we come by and see how they did? Which project did they work on? Is it somewhere in public? We could go see what's going on. Is there any sort of article about it? You know, just looking for proof, essentially, that you're not just making it up. And they can see your performance in person before they decide to invest public money into your hands and trust you with it. You would want to prioritize it with the closest related agencies that you can find, preferably federal level, and then from there down state, local, and then commercial if absolutely necessary. Okay, if you have absolutely no experience and you want to still be convincing, you can talk about your specific team members' background and expertise. You can put their picture on there, their education, their past workplaces, but that's not going to be as good as our company has done these projects in the past. Okay, the question is, when displaying your codes, is it necessary to list the code explanation, or can you just list the code numbers themselves? I would think that because it's a code, you could pretty much just list the number. You don't have a lot of space. Yeah, I think the mistake they made right here is that it's really hard to read. I mean, this is blown up 200 times. It's still kind of hard to read. They're going to be able to know what that code is, and they're going to search for it by code. If you have to think of how you would search for something, you'd rather type in 6-digit number than type all this out. And that's my personal opinion. But I would say anything that you could do to make this form less busy would be better. When you look at how they did it in their updated, improved version, it's just codes. So the bigger the font, clear contrast, less confusing, less words, more open space on a page is going to be better. That's a personal choice, but you could do what you want because it's your own document. Thanks for asking. It's a good question. Okay, that's just personal preference again. All right, so differentiators. What makes you different from other competitors? Why should they go with you and not some other entity? Generic language doesn't help you. I work with a lot of students, and we talk about how to pitch people and make sales, and usually they're talking about things like how would they ask out their friend if they want to go on a date, or how do I get an initial investor? What could I do? Is there any way I could possibly get somebody's attention and convince them that I'm the best bet, that I could be worth their time or their trouble? Generic things like, you know, we've been in business 35 years, or we're women owned, or we're best in class, or we have great customer service. Generic things are easily matchable. You know, just because you've done those things, there could be 15 other entities that are just like those. You got to do something that really hooks your audience's attention. So if you're all looking at this dog right now, then it worked. This is My dog, this is Mary the dog. You saw something that other companies probably aren't going to have. So if I have this and I can put it on a page and people's eye go to it, I've already won. And the longer you look at it and the more you focus on it, the longer I can hook your attention and get you interested, make you wanting to do business with me, or call me, or associate your organization with me, and then ultimately act on it, I have won. So you got to focus on something that's unique to your business that would hook them in that same way, that makes them want to be your customer. And essentially, hopefully you can say what makes you better, faster, cheaper, stronger, deliver on time. We have this unique technology. We have this unique system that other companies can't match. If you can do something 10 times better than your competitor and you know it, you would want to really have that be front and center on what it is that you're trying to convince people that you're great at, and just in some way show them how. If you're sending this document electronically, you could put a link on it and you could show them a video of how that service works and hook their attention so that they can remember that easily and then associate that video with your company, and they've spent more than just 10 seconds looking at this document for you. If you're interested in thinking of more about hooks, a lot of pop music has hooks in it. If you've ever heard that song, Call Me Maybe, even if you hated it, you could still recite it in your mind. If you remember that song from Kelly Clarkson, Since You've Been Gone, the second you start hearing about it, you know exactly what follows that. And you know how that song's different than all other songs. If you want to be generic and the same, you can listen to this Axis of Awesome, and they just have an example of how 40 songs you've heard before all fit over the top of each other, and it's hard to differentiate one from another. The trick to the final thing that's really going to set you apart is, does it sit in their memory later on? How did it make them feel when they read about what you provided? Was it clear and easy to understand in a very short amount of time? If you can do that, you probably can be quite persuasive, and you'll have a decent chance at a bid as much as anybody else. This last little video on here, again from Harvard Business Review, is from the art of persuasion, and how if you're trying to be persuasive, most of this has been the same for thousands of years. It's just a little fancier when you put it with an example of Honda Motor or Apple Computer or something like that, but it's all the same. So you got to keep in mind that you are being a persuasive individual who is dealing with a business type client mindset and not a consumer mindset. And they want to see proof and examples that betting on you is not going to make them look silly in their office, and they can present this to their boss, and it will look like a good idea, and everyone can be happy with what's going on. It's all very clear, and it'll make them want to follow up, to do business with you, to call you and say, how could we put this plan together for you to put a bid in place, or here's what we're really looking for. Do you think you might be interested in bidding on that? Something like that. If you were so fortunate to be in that position. This last bit of this website has many different types of links that I took from Ohio University's PTAC, all about different government bids that are available at the federal level. Then there are military bids, and the other ones are things like for the SBA, for small business assistance, and NASA bids. But that might not be exactly the field you're in. It's just a starting place, something to think about. For the main purpose of this talk today, probably the one that's going to be helpful to get started with is that sample site where you can look through some other people's examples and then follow this site and think about how your own language might fit together well. So that's what I have for today. Can I answer any additional questions? There have been a lot of really good ones along the way. I hope I got to all of them. I was trying to do both at the same time. Oh, thank you, Deborah. That's nice of you. Well, so again, this link is going to be paired with a class that I teach on entrepreneurship and innovation at LaGrange College in LaGrange, Georgia, but I will leave this part of this website connected through the rest. If you're interested in just putting together a basic business model. That'll also be available on the site at just side by side. That might be helpful if you're just getting started in your first year. You could possibly use both of those resources. And if you ever visit this page again, probably you'll see a lot of things for my students, but I'll probably put it off to the side for something that'll say like US PAC consulting. But otherwise, I appreciate you all listening today. I hope that was useful. If you would like to work together on getting your capability statements put together, you could reach out to Aisha and we might be able to line up something through the US PAC Southeast office on how that would be possible. So that would be at her discretion, I suppose. That's all I had. And Aisha, are we all set?
Oh yeah, that was great, Brian. That was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I loved it. I think we might need to have like another session to like just even go over it again. It was so much, but you explained it really nicely and all the links were very helpful. To everyone on the call, Brian is right. We can if you're interested in working with him to create your capability statement, we can connect you to him and we can do the CNPP program. Some of you are actually clients of CNPP and some are not. If you're not, I can send information on joining the program. Also, we will send out this recording to everyone who registered. There were some people that couldn't make today's webinar workshop rather, so they sent me emails and asking Brian if we can send them the recording, which is okay, is it?
Yeah, that would be great. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn if you like, if you have LinkedIn, or email me at bhunter and then the number 1 at lagrange.edu. I'll put that in. Yeah.
And I'll also the post event email that I send out, I probably won't get to send it out until Friday morning. I will also add all of that information in there too. His email and LinkedIn page. I do want to share my screen for a second. I have a couple of more things. Not much, but just a couple. We have a couple of other upcoming sessions. One is retirement planning for small business owners. That's happening November 15th. It's an hour-long workshop. I hope you can join us. I will send out, I've already sent the registration links out to these a while ago, but I'll resend them to everyone. And this is the business health checkup. That is the day after, and that's from 3:30 to 4:30. And so, and here's some contact information for the US PAC Southeast. Again, Brian, thank you so much. This was phenomenal. Thank you for agreeing to do this. A lot of small businesses do not have capability statements. Some don't even know what capability statements are. Like when we had a pitch competition in August, and I was like, well, guys, I need your capability statement. And they're like, well, what is that? Do you have a sample? Do you have a template? So I think that this is like a really needed resource, a well-needed resource for them. So I'm happy that you offered to help some of the businesses with that. Dr. Hunter also is working with us to deliver some other business development assistance, and we'll roll that out in the next few weeks or so to help the small businesses that are signed up with the Community Navigator program.
Thank you, Aisha. Thanks to
you.
everyone else.
Thank you. This was phenomenal. Thank you all for spending your afternoon with us, and thanks again. And you guys have a fantastic day.
All right, you too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.